Mason.
Thank you so much. And I told Derek that I wanted to call this the power of family in substance use and addiction and recovery. But I think if I were to rename it, I would say that this is a conversation about how family really changes everything when it comes to addiction recovery and recovery from substance use disorders, just because of how important the family system is. So when I first went through, so I'll talk a little bit about myself. I attended Oklahoma Baptist University for both my bachelor's and my master's degree. I got my master's degree in marriage and family therapy there. And when I was going through that program, it really lifted everything that I believed about family and how family changes our behaviors, our choices, and it can really change our emotions in a lot of ways. And so a lot of the problems that people are arriving into the therapy room with, when we invite family into that journey, it changes everything. It makes change more permanent. It makes change more lasting because we're changing an entire system rather than changing one component of it. And so to get started talking about that, I think what was really interesting about my journey going through grad school and then eventually becoming the therapist that I am now is learning about what people are wanting to hear about family systems work. And it was originally told to me that nobody wants to hear about family systems theory because it can be boring. It's textbook information and it can get really mundane. But the more that I've talked about it, the more that I've shared about it, the more I've realized that people really are energized by it, and it changes what they think about their own family. And what I would start with is just by reminding everybody what a system even is. We put a lot of systems into our lives, but there's also a lot of systems that are natural in our lives that occur naturally. So think about the human body. Your body is its own system. And if we go even simpler than that, there's a lot of created systems, mechanical systems, like the thermostat in our house. The thermostat in my house, I can get that thermostat to be at a certain temperature, a peak temperature, and a lowest temperature. So I set it in a range so that at a certain point, if it gets too hot in the summer in our house, then that air conditioner is going to kick on. If I say 74 degrees is the hottest that I want it to be, then as it gets warmer in the house, if it hits 74 degrees, that air conditioner is going to kick on. And I can set it at the bottom to be 68 degrees. So that if it gets cooler than 68 degrees, that heat is going to kick on. And I can switch it back and forth as much as I want. But if I'm sitting at my house one day and it's suddenly really hot, I can go look at the thermostat, and if it's 78 degrees in the house, but I've got my thermostat set at 74, then I know that something is off with the system. There's a problem because the rules that I've set for my system have been breached, and I've got to figure out how to get it back to normal. And that may mean calling in a professional to look at my air conditioner. But if you think about the human body as a system, this is something that we are constantly regulating throughout the day. We have certain rules for our bodies. We have to eat 3 times a day or however often you eat to make sure that you're not hungry. When you get hungry, it's a signal. Something's wrong, and I know what the answer is. I can regulate that. If you are I'm somebody who I almost never run a fever. So when I run a fever, I really know it. I can tell because I'm sweating, I'm shivering, I need blankets more, I'm tired, my body's trying to fight something off. And when you run a fever, because your body's temperature is exceeding itself, what it should be, you know that something is wrong. And you're going to take certain medications, you're going to get in a bath, a hot bath or a cold bath, or you're going to wrap up in blankets. You're going to do what you can to get yourself back to what you believe is normal. And for our human bodies, we know what that is, and it's trying to get the temperature back to where it's supposed to be. Families as a system are the same way. And so for this conversation, it's important to me to throw out right, wrong, good, or bad. Now we know what those things are for us as individuals and in our families. We know that we We don't want drugs to be a part of our family system. We don't want alcohol to be a part of our family system. But what we do find is that over time, it does become a normal member, depending on how long it's had a presence in the family. As frustrating as that is, and however much that goes against what we believe in, what we know to be right, wrong, good, or bad, for this conversation, think about just what the rules are in the family and what's normal and what becomes normal. Because in family systems, we also have the same homeostasis that our human bodies, or the homeostasis of my AC in my house has. Family systems are searching for homeostasis. And I've heard it said before by some professionals that that we've thrown out the idea of homeostasis because there really is no normal family. And that's not really what homeostasis is about. Each and every family has its own normal. And they decide over time, over a series of spoken and unspoken rules, what that normal is going to be. So if normal is Johnny sets fires, then we get used to what it's like when Johnny starts setting fires. Even though we don't particularly like it that Johnny sets fires, we become familiar with the fact that he does that and that we get upset about it. And Johnny also is in on the secret that when he sets fires, the people in his family get upset about it. And so we set a family homeostasis that kind of feeds into a loop, whatever we can do to protect the normal that we're accustomed to. And so this happens in a couple of ways. So 2 things to think about in your own family and to kind of start unpacking what might be happening for you and your loved ones, whoever it is in your life that's suffering from a substance use disorder. 2 things to think about: positive and negative feedback loops. And once again, throw out good, bad, right, and wrong. It's really easy to think positive, good, negative, bad. And all I want you to think about with positive and negative feedback loops is this. Positive means when the family system starts to go outside of the usual thing, outside of normal, outside of homeostasis, whatever that is, then the system will enact certain behaviors, certain new rules. They'll enact their role, their job in the family to help bring the family back to the normal that it's used to. So, and then that means that negative feedback loops does the opposite. So we try to pull back when we know that homeostasis is coming back to the normal that we're accustomed to. So it keeps the family in the same loop. So negative would be removing a behavior, and positive would be introducing a behavior that helps keep the family in its systemic behaviors. So that works with any problem. But when it comes to substance use disorders, what's really tricky is that substance use disorder, that addiction, sometimes introduces itself as a brand new family member. And that's where it gets really frustrating. And also these positive and negative feedback loops sometimes end up being defined as like codependency, enabling, or the harmful helping behaviors. We think we're helping, but we're actually enabling. And that's where that gets really hurtful, words like codependency, enabling. And so that those words hurt, they feel negative, they feel accusatory, but really all those behaviors are the things that we do because we are responding, we're reacting, but it's actually a positive it could be a positive feedback loop that's keeping the family at a certain normal. And so we have to go completely outside of what we usually do so that we can change. And the problem with change is that systems are notoriously against change. They resist change. And everybody here on Monday evening, January 6th, is probably experiencing that if you have any kind of New Year's resolution that has to do with your physical health. If you joined a gym, it's Monday and you may have skipped today. Yesterday was January 5th and you may have decided today's the day that I'm going to take a break from the diet. And you may still be on that break from that diet because our bodies, our physical systems notoriously reject change or resist change. And we try to go back to what's normal because it's more familiar, and familiarity is comfort. And so we have to kind of get away from what comfort is. It doesn't necessarily mean that if it feels bad, it's right. It just means that if you're going outside of comfort, then you're probably moving towards a new homeostasis, as long as you've decided that it's the right one. And so changing homeostasis is or a normal for a family, if we just think of that as the normal, when we start putting in boundaries, reestablishing boundaries is the way that we alone are capable of changing the way homeostasis operates. And we are the only ones who are capable of holding up those boundaries. I had a client whose mom recently said, well, I set some boundaries and then he broke all of them. And what I respond to that is, well, a boundary is something that only you can uphold, and he may push that boundary and he may not observe that boundary, but ultimately it's not your boundary if you don't have the power to uphold it. And so when we are able to establish boundaries, that redefines what the change is going to be, what the normal is going to be. And when we reestablish boundaries, it's almost always a noisy effort, because our families don't necessarily like the new changes that we like to make. Sometimes it's something that's been welcome for quite some time, but when we start to feel those boundaries, it gets noisy. It's no different than if you were to if you've ever gone through a home renovation or rearranged all the furniture in your house. If you rearrange all the furniture in your house and you have to get up in the middle of the night and walk through your house to go get a glass of water or use the restroom, you may kick the leg of the couch, and that's going to hurt because you're not used to where that couch usually is. And you're not used to that new place where the couch is. It's a new rearrangement. It's a new normal, and everybody's having to get used to it, and that's always very noisy. And so this moves me into thinking about what recovery means for each member of the family. And if you're I love Parents Helping Parents, and this is an organization that's been really helpful at Arcadia Trails. And one thing that's great about people who have been a part of Parents Helping Parents for a long time is that they're really willing to look at themselves and say, there's a part of recovery that I need. And sometimes that can be a really offensive comment to somebody who is not suffering from a substance use disorder. And it can be if we say it like, well, you need a recovery too. But what I've been starting to say to a lot of the family members who come through the treatment center and who come through my private practice is to redefine what recovery even means. And I did kind of a cliche thing and just looked up what the dictionary definition of it is. And so this isn't something that I just know, but I found it really interesting to know that recovery is just a return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength. The action or process of regaining possession or control of something stolen or lost. And it comes from an Anglo-Norman French origin of that I'm not going to try to pronounce, but it just translates to mean restoration or to get back. And so when we think about it that way, anybody who is walking through addiction, whether you are somebody who needs recovery from a substance use disorder and needs treatment, or if you're a family member who is a member of a family that's surrounding someone who's suffering from that type of a disorder, there's a lot of energy that goes out from a person that has to deal with that. So if you were to imagine right now, if my phone were to ring, or if your phone were to ring and it were a family member, and let's say somebody you've just discovered been in an auto collision, or the scans have come back and the symptoms are back and the diagnosis is not good, then you've just learned that you have a family member that's about to go through something that is going to require a lot of energy. And as a family member, if you're very close to that person, if you pick up that phone and you get that information, you're already assessing how much energy it's going to require of you. And that's not a selfish thought, because recovery is just a word that has to do with how we are replenishing the energy that's been taken out by a disease. And if addiction is the disease that we know it is, then it's going to take some energy to recover from it. And recovery is the replenishing of that energy. And if you're a family member of somebody who has been suffering from that disease, then you have spent a lot of energy, especially if you're a parent. If this is Parents Helping Parents, you're thinking about the first day that when your child was born and you held their tiny squishy body. And if you are somebody who believes that you have been the best parent you possibly could be, you may be asking yourself, how did this even happen? And that's a really normal thought, because on that day that they were born, you held their squishy body and thought, I have a covenant now with this human to protect them and to make sure that they're healthy and that they succeed. And now you are looking at them maybe as an adult or as a very grown teenager who has abstract thought and chooses things for themselves, and they're not that squishy tiny body anymore, and you're wondering how to keep that covenant upheld. And you still can, just maybe not in the same ways. But regardless, it's going to take a lot of energy out of you as you watch them go through that. And so when I tell family members that they also need recovery, what I'm telling them is that they've gone through a lot and that they need to give back to themselves a little bit from the energy that they've given. And that is a lot less offensive, and it's true. It's important to know that there's a lot of energy that goes out when we help a person. And if we think about that concept of help, this is where one of my number one personal heroes that I am not shy of telling everybody is Fred Rogers. And he knew what help was. And he would say this thing, about giving a free gift. And I can't see anybody who's watching this video or who will watch this video, but I would be inclined to give you a free gift, just like Fred Rogers would do. And he would say that, and if he were here, he would say, think right now in this moment of one person who has helped you. And they may be right beside you in the room that you're in, or they may be very far away. They may be in heaven. Whoever and wherever they are, there's someone who has smiled you into smiling. They have laughed you into laughing, and they have loved you into loving. And they are the person who has helped you. And because they have helped you in such a way that has touched you on the very inside. It's not somebody who has moved you around to different places or tried to control or manipulate you. This is a person that and you can tell the difference, that they have helped you. And I may do something kind of unconventional, but he would too. Mr. Rogers would too. And he would just say to think for a whole minute, think about that person, bring them to mind, and just think about them. And so I've got my watch, and this may be unpopular, but I want everybody who is to watch this video to stop for 1 minute and think. I'll count. Now, isn't it nice to know that wherever that person is, wouldn't they feel so great knowing that you just spent even a minute remembering them and how much they helped you, and knowing that true helping is never manipulative, it's never controlling. It's an act of love that sometimes is the most painful way of being what Mr. Rogers would call a repairer of creation. And that's what all of you, if you're thinking about your loved one who may be suffering and knowing that you want the best for them, it's what makes you a repairer of creation also. So really quickly, I just want to give a couple resources. So if you're somebody, just like was said at the beginning of this, if you're somebody who's suffering with your family member, if you're a co-sufferer with them, then I highly, highly suggest to find a place where they can receive some treatment. Even if it's their 10th exposure to treatment, that is okay. Get them somewhere where they can get some intensive treatment. Arcadia Trails is a great place to go. But there are so many other resources right here in Oklahoma City and in the state that can help you. If you don't have a family ritual that you can participate in, find one, even if it's just family dinner where you can put all the rules aside and be with each other. And finally, the last thing that I would say is to go pick up, this is a book that we use at Arcadia Trails. It's one that I really love. It's part of our curriculum that we use with our patients and their family members. It's called 6 Essentials to Achieve Lasting Recovery by Sterling Shumway and Thomas Kimball. I got to meet them at a conference recently, and they even signed this copy of my book. It's available. I'm pretty sure it's on Amazon, but it's a Hazelden publication, if you know what Hazelden Betty Ford is. This is an excellent short exposure to what it's like to be participating with family in addiction recovery. So that's all I have for tonight.
Mason, really quick. So I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to ask everybody if you have a question, now's the time to comment that on Facebook or to chat that or ask that to me in Zoom. While we're waiting to see if anybody's got any questions, tell us what you guys do at Arcadia Trails, how people can get in touch, and tell us what you do at your private practice and how people can get in touch.
Yes. At Arcadia Trails is a 90-day intensive residential treatment center. And I really mean intensive. And it's getting more and more intensive. We just opened back in May. And we've seen a number of people come through that program. And we've been very, very pleased with the progress people have been able to make and the progress that families have been able to make with each other. It's 90 days of intensive treatment. That means that it's when a patient is at Arcadia Trails, treatment from Monday through Friday and even Saturday and Sunday, treatment is their full-time job. It's not relaxication where they can escape to a luxury hotel and then detox and stay away from their drug of choice for 90 days. It is hard work. And it's grueling work. It's if you want to know more, you can go to the website at Arcadia Trails Integris. You can find that on the Integris website. It'll send you directly to our website. You find it on
the website is also in the comment thread on the Facebook feed.
And you can even call if you're ready to get your family member into treatment. We can do that really quickly. If you wanted to call 216-2500, we do admissions throughout the day. It's not 24/7 admissions, but we do have case managers during the daytime who are ready to schedule those admissions. And if you were to call that number now, you would reach a nurse ready to take that information so that we can follow up with you and get your family member admitted as early as tomorrow if you wanted. What else about Arcadia Trails? We have a pretty diverse staff. We're able to provide a board certified art therapy, which is a really unique offering at Arcadia Trails. We also have therapists who are EMDR certified, which is very, very useful with trauma, which is a big part of substance use disorders and co-occurring disorders. And I work there, and I'm also a hypnotherapist, and that's been really successful for people wanting to stop smoking and explore deep embedded childhood trauma. As well as help them energize their recovery. So group therapy is the prime focus while they're there. That's a lot about Arcadia. Myself, I'm in private practice outside of Arcadia Trails. And you can, if you want to create a family session or if you want to receive hypnotherapy privately, you can go to my website at a really long URL, which is
also in the comment thread.
Also in the comment thread. And you can also email me straight from my website. So you can even book an appointment. You don't even have to talk to me to book an appointment. You can just go to my website and book one. And I would be really excited to see you. So.
Excellent. There haven't been any questions. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mason, for being here, for sharing your expertise with us. I really appreciate it. Back to
Thanks
me.
for having me.
Lots of good information there. Arcadia Trails, it's a new resource, fairly new resource here in Oklahoma City that everybody should be familiar with, or if you'd like to check out the comment thread so that you can see more about what Mason does in his private practice and you can reach out with him. Thanks for joining us. We were delighted that you were here. Be back January 20th, 2 weeks from tonight at 7 p.m. for our next live Parents Helping Parents meeting. And everybody be safe. Have a good first half of your month. That's it.
Thank you so much.
End meeting.